care, and gosh, I hope they do on a strictly an economic basis. I think it would take some uncertainty out. Maybe some employers might hire a few people, but on top of that, small businesses are basically frozen out. I have another friend of mine here on the East Coast. He's a business broker, and they basically, if you have a pizza parlor, you have a restaurant, or you have a nail store or whatever
that you want to sell, right?
You want to sell. The owner has to finance it. And
what happened to the old SBA loans?
All that stuff is hard to get, very arduous, very, very high capital requirements.
Jeez.
I'm not saying you can't get it, but what he's telling me is that on a restaurant, the banks in his state won't even loan money on a restaurant.
They won't do that.
They won't loan money, which is kind of sad because some restaurants could be really good. A small diner could do very good business in this environment. Maybe a steak, maybe a Ruth Chris wouldn't do so well, but maybe it would. I don't know. But there's a diner that I go into all the time. It's packed. It's only open from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Locally owned?
Locally owned,
yeah.
packed every day, cheap and good. And I think that's the ingredient for a successful restaurant these days: cheap and good.
Well, thank God for the locally owned banks. They still seem to be strong, huh?
Well, I did a post about the banks. I did a post about banks slip-sliding away. And, it wasn't all a big high and mighty research project. I went on thestreet.com, and I started looking at A-rated banks. In my state, the state I'm living in now, I used to live in New York, North Carolina, I sold a house in 2006, so I had some money to invest, and I looked around for banks, and there was 10 A-rated banks in the state of North Carolina. This is a state of about 10 million people. And so I just went on recently and found out that North Carolina had one A-rated bank according to thestreet.com.
That's it.
Then I looked into California. I looked into California. California has I think 5 A-rated banks in the state of California, and they have 130 weak or very weak banks. And I added up all the weak and very weak banks across the country.
It's scary, isn't it?
It's 1,400 weak or very weak banks, and this is according to thestreet.com. And that information, and this is what's really scary, is 6 months old. The last, up until a couple of days ago when I checked it, the last time the ratings came out was June 30th. New ratings should come out now. It's a free service that somebody can use, incidentally, if they're looking around for parking, money in the intermediate term. In the short term, if you have a D or a E rated bank, I would be moving my money. I would be making other plans.
Isn't the FDIC running out of money, Greg?
The FDIC, as of September of last year, I believe they reported they were at a negative $8 billion. They came out to all their member banks and asked for 3 years of premiums up front. They do have a line of credit to the Treasury, a $500 billion line, but part of where that $500 billion, this is what's really nasty, and it's where the press isn't doing its job. They got a $500 billion credit line. What are they doing with it? Well, there's something called the Temporary Liquidity Guarantee Program. Who are they giving money to? They're giving money to the banks. They're guaranteeing their bonds. They're also guaranteeing bank holding companies. General Electric is supposed to have a AAA rating. They have something like $80 billion in guarantees by the government. Why? Why would a AAA rated company need guarantees from the FDIC? Goldman Sachs guarantees from the FDIC. They're getting these sweetheart deals still from your and my tax dollars and your and my credit rating. And when I talk about your and my credit rating, the credit rating of the United States of America. It's unbelievable what they're doing, like the Fannie Mae thing and Freddie Mac thing done on Christmas Eve. What does the press do? They don't do anything. I'm really saddened by the coverage of the press of all this. When all this broke in 2008, in February of 2008, a guy by the name of Paul Volcker, former Fed chief, the real maestro, he basically killed inflation by jacking interest rates up to the moon. He's endearingly looked at now, but boy, in the early 80s, he was hated. I mean, he jacked rates up to 20%. People like, gold went up to $850 an ounce, and we're not going to have people invest in gold. We're going to have people invest in treasuries. So he jacked up rates to the moon. Remember, I don't know how old you are, George. Probably younger than me, but
59.
Oh, well,
I'm a little older than you.
Not by much, though. But, you couldn't hardly give away a 15% CD, FDIC insured. And, that's the kind of stuff, he said in this meeting that what we were looking at was the mother of all crises. I was like, what? He said that where? In front of 500 people? The mother of all crises? I was using him as a source at CNN. I came out, I was one of the things, one of my ongoing themes in late 2007 and 2008 was we're already in a recession. You can't take out housing, autos, and the banks and not be in a recession. Remember in 2007, people go, are we in a recession? Oh, do you think we're in a recession? Yes, if we're not in one, we're headed for one.
And they're saying we're out of one, but we're not.
That's not true.
But we're not. Let's take some calls. You ready?
Okay, sure.
Cambridge, Massachusetts on the wild card line. Peter, get us started. Go ahead.
How are you?
Okay.
I've been listening to all this. I don't understand it. Then I hear things on the radio like Kraft's going to buy another company for $1 billion, and I don't understand that. So I have two simple questions. Does this mean that money's not going to be worth anything? We're not going to be able to buy anything? There's going to be riots, and they're going to put us all into prison?
I can't tell you if money is going to evaporate. There is one guy out there. His name is John Williams. He runs a company called shadowstats.com. And a quick little interlude here. He basically takes raw numbers and he recalculates the numbers the way the government did it before all their gimmicks and distortions. For example, the inflation rate, the inflation rate was just announced a week ago that it was 2.7%. It is really 9.7%. The unemployment rate, they keep saying it's 10%. If you did the unemployment rate the way it was done, the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics did it back in 1994 and earlier, it would be 21.9%. To your question, is money going to be worthless? I don't know. John Williams also says that he thinks there will be a hyperinflationary event in the next 5 years. I say I don't see how you get around with the bailout of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and AIG and $787 billion TARP money and all the states, 46 of the 50 states being bankrupt. And they're going to help them out in this election year. California, what is that, $25 billion underwater. They're going to print the money and help them out. I can't see how in the world we're not going to have, at the very least, big inflation. And I don't mean for our grandchildren. I mean, right now the inflation rate, if you calculate it the way it was done in 1980, it's 9.7%.
All right, Greg. Next question, Greg.
Okay.
Let's go to you again, Peter. You said you had one more?
Well, very simple. Am I going to be able to buy food and simple basic things?
If you're on fixed income, you are going to really have a hard time because your fixed income, your cost of living will not keep up with inflation.
You got to control your housing too, somehow. If you're on a fixed income,
yes.
When you get to retirement age, if you don't have that little spot where at least Social Security will pay that and give you your food, you're screwed.
Are you on fixed income?
Let's go to our next caller. Okay.
Yep.
Rosemary, Long Island, New York, east of the Rockies, listening on WABC, no doubt. Go ahead, Rosemary.
Hi. I'm one of these people who's in my late 60s and just went with a new financial advisor fairly recently. And he's putting everything that I had in sort of fixed type of investments into diversified holdings of all sorts across a whole pie chart of, how they show you these colored pie charts of investments.
I've got some theories about that, and it's not going to be very popular, and it's not what you've heard. On my website, I did a post called The Smell of Money Harvesting. Now, let's think about this for a second. The S&P 500 is about where it was in 2000. That's the 500 biggest companies in America. It's about where it was in 2000. And we are about 25% below where we were. 20% was at 10,005. So somewhere around 20, 25% below where we were at its peak, their most recent peak. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Buy and hold for the long term. That's 10 years' time. And we're 25% below.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing to consider, okay, when you're diversified, you're paying this guy a commission. You're paying the mutual funds about 1% a year, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So if you add up the 10 years, now you are about 25% down, you paid 10%. Oh, let's add one more thing. If you count the S&P 500, that's Fannie Mae, Freddie